The void screamed. Slipspace wasn't supposed to sound like anything. It was a dimension outside normal physics, a mathematical shortcut through reality that humanity had barely begun to understand even after decades of using it. But as the UNSC Infinity tore through the fabric between dimensions, every sensor aboard the massive warship registered anomalies that made the engineering crew's blood run cold. Captain Thomas Lasky stood on the bridge, one hand gripping the railing as the ship bucked and shuddered around him. Warning klaxons blared. Holographic displays flickered and died, came back, died again. The view screen showed nothing but chaos, streamers of impossible color, geometric patterns that hurt to look at, and something that looked disturbingly like eyes watching from the dimensional breach. Status report. Lasky's voice cut through the noise with practiced authority. Commander Sarah Palmer, head of Spartan operations, was already at her station, fingers flying across, controls that responded sluggishly. Slipspace drive is redlining. Whatever we hit, it's not playing nice with our exit vector. Engineering, I need options. Lasky barked into the comm. The response came through heavy with static. Sir, the drive is trying to compensate for spatial distortions we've never seen before. It's like slipspace itself is different here. Wrong. We need to shut it down or we'll tear the ship apart. Lasky made the call in half a heartbeat. Emergency shutdown. All hands brace for rapid deceleration. The Infinity lurched as the slipspace drive cut out. For one terrible moment, the ship hung suspended between dimensions, and every soul aboard felt the universe holding its breath. Then reality snapped back with force that threw crew members against their stations despite the inertial dampeners. The view screen cleared. Stars, thousands of them. Unfamiliar constellations burning against the void. Roland, the Infinity's AI, materialized on the central holotank, his avatar flickering as he processed unprecedented amounts of data. His usually casual demeanor was replaced by something Lasky had rarely seen: genuine confusion. Captain, we have a problem. Roland's voice was tight. Actually, we have several problems. First, we're not in UNSC space. Second, we're not in any space I can match to our star charts. Third, he paused, and his avatar actually frowned. Third, I'm detecting energy signatures that don't match any known technology. Not human, not Covenant, not even Forerunner. Lasky moved to the holotank, studying the readouts with growing unease. 23 years in the Navy had taught him to trust his instincts, and right now those instincts were screaming that they'd stumbled into something far beyond a simple navigation error. Show me what we're looking at, he said quietly. The holotank shifted, displaying a tactical overview of local space. The Infinity hung at the center, alone, dwarfing even the largest Covenant carriers in the database. But what caught Lasky's attention were the contacts appearing at the edge of sensor range. Ships, dozens of them, and their configurations were like nothing in any naval database. Magnify, Lasky ordered. The image zoomed. What resolved on screen made several bridge officers draw sharp breaths. Triangular vessels, massive and bristling with weapons, their hulls a menacing gray-white that spoke of military purpose. They moved in formation with disciplined precision, and as the Infinity's sensors analyzed them, the numbers that came back were troubling. Those ships, Lieutenant Dominique said from the sensor station, her voice uncertain. Sir, they're reading as capital ships, but the power signatures are all wrong. Lower output than our reactors, but they're definitely combat vessels. Multiple weapon systems, some kind of deflector technology. Are they hostile? Lasky asked. Unknown, sir. They've altered course. They're moving. To intercept. Palmer appeared at Lasky's shoulder, her expression grim. Want me to ready the Spartans? Not yet. We don't know who these people are or what we're dealing with. He straightened, making a decision. Hail them, all frequencies. Let's try to keep this friendly. Roland worked for several seconds before nodding. Channel open, Captain. Though I should mention their communications protocols are primitive isn't quite the right word. Different. Very different. This is Captain Thomas Lasky of the UNSC Infinity to approaching vessels. We mean no harm. We've experienced a navigation malfunction and request assistance in determining our location. Please respond. Silence stretched. The triangular ships continued their approach, spreading into what was unmistakably an attack formation. They're not responding, Roland reported, but they're definitely scanning us, actively. I'm detecting some kind of tachyon-based sensor sweep, actually pretty clever, though nowhere, near our resolution. Captain, Dominique called out urgently. More contacts, 6 more capital ships dropping out of... She paused, consulting her readouts with disbelief. Sir, they just appeared. No slip space rupture, no recognizable FTL signature. They just appeared. Hyperspace, Roland muttered, more to himself than anyone else. They're using some kind of hyperspace technology. Fascinating. Terrifying, but fascinating. The new ships were even larger than the first group. One in particular dominated the formation. A massive, wedge-shaped vessel that made even the Infinity look merely large rather than overwhelming. Its hull bristled with weapons emplacements, and as it settled into formation, every tactical display on the bridge lit up with targeting solutions. Then the communication came through. The voice was cold, efficient, carrying the weight of absolute authority. Unknown vessel, this is Captain Terranald of the Imperial Star Destroyer Relentless. You have violated restricted Imperial space. Power down your weapons and shields immediately and prepare to be boarded. Resistance will result in your destruction. Lasky and Palmer exchanged glances. The word Imperial hung in the air like a threat. Roland, analysis? Lasky asked quietly. Their language is translating, barely. Some kind of... I don't even know, Captain. It's like basic English, but wrong. Ancient, maybe. Or evolved differently. The AI paused. The important part is what they're calling themselves. An empire. And based on fleet disposition and communications protocols, they expect immediate compliance. They can expect all they want, Palmer said flatly. We're not surrendering to some tin-pot dictator in unknown space. Lasky held up a hand. He keyed the comm back open, keeping his voice diplomatic but firm. Captain Terranald, I repeat, we are not hostile. We've experienced a critical navigation failure. We're willing to communicate and explain our presence, but we will not power down our defenses until we understand the situation. The response was immediate and uncompromising. You have 30 seconds to comply or we will open fire. On the tactical display, weapons systems across the Imperial fleet powered up. Energy signatures spiked. The massive central ship, the Star Destroyer, began rotating to bring its heaviest weapons to bear. Shields up, Lasky ordered, his voice calm despite the adrenaline beginning to flow. Weapons to standby. Roland, how do we stack up against them? Technologically, we're generations ahead in almost every category. Their power systems are fusion-based, maybe even more primitive. Their shields, deflector screens based on the readings. They're strong, but operate on completely different principles than our energy shielding. As for weapons, Roland's avatar grinned despite the tension. Captain, they're using directed energy weapons and some kind of solid projectile system. Nowhere near MAC velocity. We could probably tank their entire fleet. Probably isn't good enough, Lasky said. I don't want to fight. But if they force one... 10 seconds, Dominique announced. Lasky made a decision he hoped he wouldn't regret. This is Captain Lasky to Imperial Fleet. We will not surrender our ship. However, we're willing to... The Star Destroyer opened fire. Brilliant green bolts erupted from its turbo-laser batteries, streaking across the void. They splashed against the Infinity's shields in spectacular displays of dissipating energy, but the shields held easily. More ships fired. The space around the Infinity lit up with weapons fire that would have shattered any normal vessel. The shields didn't even flicker. All ships firing, Dominique reported, her voice tight with controlled tension. Shields holding at 98%, minimal drain. Palmer leaned in close to Lasky. They just made their intentions clear. Your call, Captain. Lasky's jaw tightened. He'd hoped to avoid this. Had wanted first contact with whatever civilization controlled this space to be peaceful. But they'd fired first. Had demanded surrender without negotiation. And he had a crew of thousands to protect. Target the lead Star Destroyer, he said quietly. Mac gun. Single round, center mass, fire. The magnetic accelerator cannon was the Infinity's primary weapon. A railgun of such devastating power that its projectiles could shatter continents. The round that left the Infinity's bow was a slug of tungsten and depleted uranium accelerated to a fraction of the speed of light. It crossed the distance to the Star Destroyer in less than a second. The Imperial deflector shields never stood a chance. The round punched through them like they weren't there, tore through the Star Destroyer's armor plating, and exited the other side in an explosion of vaporized metal and atmosphere. The massive warship shuddered, internal explosions rippling along its length as the kinetic impact transferred through its entire structure. The Star Destroyer didn't explode dramatically. It simply broke. Structural integrity compromised beyond any hope of recovery. The ship began tearing itself apart as its own mass worked against it. Escape pods launched frantically as the crew abandoned ship. The rest of the Imperial fleet stopped firing. Silence fell across the bridge of the Infinity. Several officers stared at the tactical display in shock. They'd known the Mac gun was powerful, but seeing it used against an unknown capital ship brought home just how devastating UNSC weaponry truly was. "Holy hell," someone whispered. "They're withdrawing," Dominique reported, her voice shaking slightly. "All ships breaking formation. Captain, they're running." On the view screen, the remaining Imperial vessels were indeed retreating, several already vanishing back into hyperspace. Within minutes, only debris and the dying hulk of the Star Destroyer remained. Lasky stood, motionless, staring at what they'd done. A single shot, one round from the Mac gun, and they'd crippled a warship that had likely taken years to build and been home to thousands of crew. "Roland," he said quietly. "Did they have time to evacuate?" "Most of them, yes. I'm detecting hundreds of escape pods. Their evacuation systems are actually quite good. Better than ours in some ways." The AI paused. "Captain, we had no choice. They fired first." "I know." Lasky turned to face his crew. They were looking at him, waiting for orders, for reassurance, for some indication of what came next. "I know we had no choice, but we just made first contact with an unknown civilization by destroying one of their warships. That's not how I wanted this to start." Palmer moved to his side, her voice low enough that only he could hear. "We're in unknown space, surrounded by hostiles who shoot first and don't ask questions. Sometimes survival doesn't give us the luxury of perfect first impressions. I know that too." He took a breath, centering himself. "All right. We need to figure out where we are and how to get home. Roland, full sensor sweep. I want to know everything about this region of space. Dominique, monitor all communication frequencies. If that fleet reports back to whoever's in charge, I want to know what they're saying. Palmer, brief your Spartans. Until we know what we're dealing with, we assume hostiles could arrive at any moment." "Sir," Dominique interrupted. "I'm picking up communication traffic. It's encrypted, but Roland is working on it. And Captain, there's a lot of it. This isn't empty space. This region is dense with inhabited systems." "How dense?" Lasky asked, already dreading the answer. Roland materialized again, and this time his expression was genuinely shocked. "Captain, I've been analyzing the local stellar cartography and cross-referencing the communication traffic. If my calculations are correct, and they usually are, we're looking at thousands of inhabited worlds within a relatively compact region of space, maybe tens of thousands. This isn't a nation, sir. This is a galactic-scale civilization." The bridge went quiet as the implications sank in. "And we just blew up one of their warships," Palmer said flatly. "Yeah." Lasky moved back to the holotank, studying the star charts with growing concern. "Roland, how long until you crack their encryption?" "Already done. It's actually pretty simple once you understand the base algorithm. Routing to speakers now. The voice that came through was sharp with alarm, speaking in that strange variant of English that barely translated. Unknown vessel demonstrated extreme hostile capability. Recommend immediate fleet mobilization. This is a threat level we haven't seen since... Static drowned out the rest. Another voice, deeper, carrying unmistakable menace. Lord Vader has been informed. He will handle this personally. Lasky felt a chill run down his spine. Something about the way that name was spoken, the fear and awe mixed together, told him they just attracted the attention of someone very dangerous. "Who's Vader?" he asked. Roland pulled up what fragmentary data he'd gleaned from the communication intercepts. "Near as I can tell, some kind of enforcer for this empire. High-ranking, feared. The communications suggest he's not entirely human. The descriptions are fragmentary, but they mention abilities that don't match any known technology." "Abilities like what?" "Like seeing the future, like moving objects without touching them, like..." Roland paused. "Captain, this is going to sound insane, but multiple sources reference what they call the Force. Some kind of energy field that connects all living things and can be manipulated by trained individuals. It's described almost like magic." "There's no such thing as magic," Palmer said dismissively. "Just technology we don't understand yet." "Maybe." Roland didn't sound convinced. "But I'm also detecting something else. Energy readings throughout this region of space that don't correspond to anything in our physics models. It's subtle, barely there, but it's everywhere. Like background radiation, but more organized, purposeful." Lasky rubbed his temples, feeling a headache building. They'd gone from fighting the Covenant to being lost in unknown space, surrounded by a galactic empire, having just destroyed one of their ships, and now their AI was telling them about some kind of mystical energy field. "One problem at a time," he decided. "First priority, survival. We need to know what we're up against. Roland, continue monitoring communications. Map as much of local space as possible. I want to know where the major population centers are, where military installations might be, anything that gives us tactical intelligence." "Already on it, Captain. Though I should mention, based on traffic patterns, we're fairly close to what seems to be a major military staging area. Lots of Imperial chatter about defensive positions and fleet movements." "Of course we are." Lasky allowed himself a bitter smile. "Palmer, get your Spartans ready for anything. If this Vader character shows up with another fleet, we may need to board enemy vessels to buy time for an escape." Palmer nodded sharply. "Fireteam Osiris is already standing by. Locke, Buck, Tanaka, and Vale. Best of the best." "Good, because I have a feeling we're going to need them." As if summoning it by speaking, the sensors screamed a new warning. "Contact!" Dominique shouted. "Multiple hyperspace signatures, big ones. Captain, we've got at least 20 capital ships inbound, and one of them..." Her face went pale. "Sir, one of them is twice the size of the Star Destroyer we just destroyed." On the view screen, space rippled as the Imperial fleet dropped out of hyperspace. And at its center, like a dagger aimed at the heart of the Infinity, was a vessel that radiated menace, a super-star destroyer. 8 kilometers of weapons, armor, and Imperial authority. And standing on its bridge, though they couldn't see him yet, was the Dark Lord whose name had been spoken with such fear. Vader had arrived. Lasky stood straight, meeting Palmer's eyes. In them, he saw the same grim determination that had carried them through the war with the Covenant, through impossible battles and desperate last stands. "All hands," he said into the shipwide comm, his voice carrying to every deck, every station, every Marine and crew member aboard the most powerful warship humanity had ever built. "Battle stations, this is not a drill. We've got incoming hostiles, and they're not here to talk. So we're going to show them exactly what the UNSC is made of. We didn't survive the Covenant just to surrender to some empire in unknown space. Stand ready." He cut the comm and turned to his bridge crew. "If they want to fight, we'll give them one they'll never forget. All weapons, prepare to fire." The Infinity's arsenal came alive. Mac guns charging, missile pods loading, point defense systems tracking targets. And in the hangar bays, Spartan Fire Team Osiris checked their weapons and waited for the inevitable. The Empire was coming, and the UNSC was ready. Darth Vader stood on the bridge of the Executor, his hands clasped behind his back, respirator breathing its rhythmic cadence into the tense silence. Before him, the viewports displayed a sight that had brought the Imperial Navy to a standstill. A single ship, massive beyond reason, bristling with weapons that defied conventional design, and radiating a presence in space that felt wrong. Lord Vader, Admiral Piet approached with careful deference, his voice steady despite the anxiety rolling off him in waves that Vader could taste through the Force. We've analyzed the weapon that destroyed the Relentless. It appears to be a kinetic projectile accelerated to near-relativistic speeds. Our deflector shields may not be sufficient. I am aware. Vader's voice was a mechanized rumble that cut through Piet's report. He reached out through the Force, extending his consciousness toward the alien vessel, seeking the threads of destiny and intention that connected all living things, and found nothing. Not emptiness, not the void of droids or the limited presence of non-sentience. This was something else entirely. There were minds aboard that ship, thousands of them, but they existed somehow outside the Force's natural flow, like holes in reality, absences where presence should be. It disturbed him in ways he hadn't felt since his transformation on Mustafar. Lord Vader, Piet ventured when the silence stretched too long. There is something unnatural about that vessel. Vader turned from the viewport, his cape sweeping behind him. And its crew. Deploy the fleet in attack formation. Star Destroyers Devastator, Avenger, and Tyrant will provide covering fire. Ready all fighter wings. And prepare my personal shuttle. I will be leading the boarding action myself. Piet's surprise was evident, even through his trained composure. My lord, surely allowing you to board an unknown hostile vessel is exactly what the situation requires. Vader's tone allowed no argument. That ship represents a threat to Imperial dominance unlike anything we've encountered. The Emperor himself has commanded that I assess this threat personally. We will capture this vessel, dissect its technology, and learn the secrets of whoever built it. He paused, then added with certainty born from the Force. They are not from our galaxy. They are displaced. Lost. That makes them vulnerable. As you command, my lord. Orders flowed across the Imperial fleet. 20 Star Destroyers moved into position, their turbo laser batteries charging, their crews preparing for battle. TIE fighters launched in swarms, thousands of the nimble craft forming a lethal cloud around the capital ships. Assault shuttles and boarding craft prepped their contingents of stormtroopers and Imperial commandos. And in a specialized hangar aboard the Executor, Vader's personal inquisitors, Force sensitives trained to hunt Jedi, gathered around their master. The seventh sister checked her double-bladed lightsaber, her Myrialan features set in concentration. The fifth brother cracked his massive knuckles, anticipation radiating from him. The Grand Inquisitor himself stood apart, his Pauan features unreadable as he contemplated the coming battle. Vader addressed them with his usual economy of words. The beings aboard that vessel are unlike anything you've encountered. They exist outside the Force's influence. I cannot sense their intentions or predict their actions. This makes them dangerous, more dangerous perhaps than any Jedi. He let that sink in. But they are not invincible. They are mortal. They can be killed. Prove yourselves worthy of the Emperor's trust. The Inquisitors bowed in unison. Yes, Lord Vader. Captain Lasky watched the Imperial formation with growing unease. The sheer number of ships was staggering, far more than any Covenant fleet he'd faced. But numbers alone didn't worry him. It was the precision of their movements, the discipline evident in their formations, the sense that this empire knew how to wage war on a scale that made even the human Covenant war look like border skirmishes. Roland's avatar flickered beside him, processing tactical data faster than any human mind could manage. His usually casual demeanor had been replaced by cold calculation. "Captain, I've analyzed their approach vectors. They're setting up a classic envelopment, trying to surround us, cut off any escape routes. Smart. They learned from the first encounter not to engage us directly in small numbers." "Can we break through?" Lasky asked. "Probably, but they've got fighter cover that's going to be a problem. I'm counting 3,500 individual small craft. Our point defense can handle them, but if they swarm us while the capital ships pound our shields, we're going to take damage." Commander Palmer appeared on the tactical display via hologram, broadcasting from the Spartan deck. "Captain, Fire Team Osiris is ready. If they try boarding action, we'll be waiting." "I'm counting on it." Lasky straightened, making his decision. "We're not running. These people need to understand we're not easy prey, but I also don't want to massacre their entire fleet if we can avoid it." He paused, then keyed the comm. "This is Captain Lasky to the Imperial fleet. Last warning. We are not hostile. We do not want conflict. Stand down and allow us passage, or we will defend ourselves." The response came not from Admiral Payette, but from a voice that seemed to carry the weight of stars, cold, mechanical, absolute. "You will surrender your vessel, or you will be destroyed. There is no third option. Vader." Even through the communication system, filtered through translation protocols and electronic distortion, something in that voice made Lasky's instincts scream danger. "So much for diplomacy," Palmer muttered. "Weapons free," Lasky ordered. "Target their fighter screen. First, give them a chance to withdraw. If they don't, switch to capital ship targets, and someone get me a firing solution on that big one in the center." "The Superstar Destroyer," Roland supplied. 8 kilometers long, heavily armored, approximately 40,000 crew. Taking it down won't be easy. "Nothing ever is." The Imperial fleet opened fire. Space erupted in violence. Green bolts of turbo-laser fire converged on the Infinity from every direction, a storm of energy that would have vaporized any lesser ship. The shields flared brilliant blue as they absorbed and dispersed the incoming energy, holding steady but beginning to show strain under the sustained barrage. "Shields at 85%, Dominique reported. "They're concentrating fire on our ventral sections, smart, trying to overwhelm a single shield face. Rotate shield distribution, don't give them a weak spot to exploit." Lasky gripped the railing as the ship shuddered under the assault. "Roland, launch longswords and pelicans. Tell them to engage the TIE fighters, keep them off our hull." "Launching now." The Infinity's fighter bays opened, and humanity's war machines screamed into the void. Longsword interceptors, heavily armed, heavily armored, built to survive in the chaos of ship-to-ship combat. Pelican dropships modified for space superiority, their pilots among the best in the UNSC Navy. The TIE fighters swarmed to meet them. What followed was a knife fight in space. The TIEs were fast, maneuverable, terrifyingly aggressive, but unshielded and lightly armored. The UNSC fighters were slower, heavier, but could take punishment that would shred a TIE fighter into fragments. The engagement was brutal and immediate. Longsword autocannons tore through TIE squadrons like paper. Missiles tracked targets with lethal precision, proximity detonations taking out multiple fighters at once. But the Empire had numbers, and for every TIE destroyed, 2 more took its place, their laser cannons chipping away at armor, searching for weak points. Aboard the longsword Crimson Wing, Lieutenant Sarah Chen pulled hard on the stick, evading a stream of laser fire that stitched across space where she'd been a heartbeat before. Her targeting computer screamed warnings as 3 TIEs locked onto her tail. "I've got multiples on me," she shouted into the comm. "Could use some help here?" "On it." Pelican Delta 9 swept across her flight path, its door gunner opening up with a GAU chin-mounted machine gun. The tungsten rounds ripped through the lead TIE, reducing it to expanding debris. The other 2 broke off, seeking easier prey. Chen took advantage of the reprieve to line up a shot on a TIE bomber making a run toward the Infinity. She squeezed the trigger, and her autocannon spat fire. The bomber came apart in a satisfying explosion, But there were so many more. On the Infinity's bridge, the tactical display was a nightmare of red icons and threat. Warnings. "Captain, they're launching boarding craft." Dominique's voice was tight. "Multiple assault shuttles making attack runs. They're heading for our hangar bays and ventral docking ports." Palmer's hologram turned to face Lasky. "Let them come. We'll be ready." "Negative," Lasky countermanded. "Point defense. Take out those shuttles before they reach us. I don't want enemy combatants aboard my ship if we can avoid it." The Infinity's point defense network came alive. M870 Rampart guns tracked incoming threats with computer-guided precision, their 50mm autocannons creating a web of fire that nothing should be able to penetrate. The assault shuttles flew into that storm and began dying. Explosions blossomed across space as shuttle after shuttle was torn apart. But the Empire had anticipated losses. For every shuttle destroyed, another made it through, latching onto the Infinity's hull with magnetic clamps and cutting torches. "We've got breaches," Roland reported grimly. "Deck 7, 11, and 19. Enemy boarding parties are cutting through." "All Marine detachments respond to breach points," Lasky ordered. "Palmer, get your Spartans moving. I want those boarders contained and neutralized." "Already on it." Deep in the Infinity's corridors, the Imperial assault began. Stormtroopers poured through the breaches, their white armor stark against the utilitarian gray of UNSC ship interiors. They moved in disciplined formations, weapons ready, expecting resistance. They got it. UNSC Marines had been fighting the Covenant for decades, had learned to hold corridors against enemies that were stronger, faster, and more technologically advanced than humanity. They met the Imperial borders with a wall of gunfire that turned the corridors into killing zones. MA-5 assault rifles barked in controlled bursts. Shotguns roared at close range. Marines used every advantage: cover positions, overlapping fields of fire, grenade traps set at choke points. The stormtroopers, for all their training, had never faced anything like this. Their armor, designed to protect against blaster fire, proved less effective against solid projectiles traveling at supersonic speeds. But the Empire had brought more than just stormtroopers. At the breach on Deck 7, something else emerged from the assault shuttle. A figure in dark robes, face hidden behind a mask, spinning twin blades of crimson light that hissed and crackled with energy. The seventh sister had entered the battle. She moved through the corridor like death-given form, her lightsabers deflecting bullets with precognitive precision. Marines died before they could adjust their aim, cut down by blades that burned through armor and flesh with equal ease. She advanced without speaking, without hesitation, guided by the Force toward the ship's critical systems, until she ran into something she couldn't predict. Spartan Jameson Locke came around the corner at full sprint, his armors, active camouflage deactivating as he opened fire. The seventh sister's precognition screamed warning, and she spun, lightsabers moving to intercept. But Locke had already compensated. He wasn't aiming where she was. He was aiming where his combat computer predicted she'd be when she dodged. The burst caught her in the shoulder, spinning her around, pain exploding through her body. She reached out with the Force to throw him back, but the Spartan was already moving, his augmented reflexes carrying him into a slide beneath her telekinetic grip. He came up firing again, forcing her to retreat, her connection to the Force suddenly uncertain. She couldn't read him, couldn't sense his intentions. It was like fighting a void, an absence in reality that moved with inhuman speed and tactical brilliance. "All units be advised," she gasped into her comm, blood running down her arm. "The armored warriors, they're outside the Force. Do not engage alone." Elsewhere on the ship, the fifth brother discovered the same terrifying truth. He'd cut through a dozen Marines, his massive frame and brutal fighting style overwhelming their defenses. The Force guided his movements, letting him sense attacks before they came, allowing him to deflect fire and retaliate with devastating effectiveness. Then Spartan Holly Tanaka put 3 rounds through his leg from a position he hadn't sensed. The fifth brother went down hard, confusion and pain warring in his mind. He reached out through the force, seeking his attacker, and found nothing. A blank space where awareness should be. Tanaka advanced, her M395 DMR trained on his center mass. "Stay down," she commanded, her voice filtered through her helmet speakers. The fifth brother snarled and reached out with the force, attempting to crush her armor with telekinetic pressure. He felt the power gather, felt it strike, and watched in disbelief as she staggered slightly but remained standing, her armor's structural integrity holding against force that should have crumpled it like paper. Tanaka tilted her head, analyzing him through her HUD. Interesting. Some kind of telekinetic ability. "Roland, you getting this?" "Recorded," the AI confirmed in her earpiece. "Whatever that energy field is, it's interacting with matter on a quantum level. Fascinating. Try to take him alive if possible. I'd like to study him." The fifth brother tried to rise, lightsaber swinging in a desperate arc. Tanaka simply stepped back out of range, her augmented reflexes faster than his injured body could manage, and shot him again, this time in the other leg. He collapsed, roaring in pain and frustration. "Alive it is," Tanaka confirmed, moving to secure the prisoner. The battle raged for 27 minutes. In that time, the Infinity's weapons demonstrated why humanity had survived the Covenant War. Mac rounds punched through Star Destroyers with contemptuous ease, each shot crippling or destroying a capital ship. Archer missile pods launched waves of ship killers that overwhelmed Imperial point defenses, detonating against hulls in cascading explosions. The ship's energy projectors, adapted from Forerunner technology, cut through Imperial shields like they weren't there. But the Empire's numbers were taking their toll. The Infinity's shields were down to 40%. Hull breaches had been reported on 6 decks. Casualties were mounting, both from the space battle and from the boarding action still raging in the corridors. And then Vader himself arrived. His assault shuttle bypassed the point defenses through sheer audacity, using the wreckage of destroyed Star Destroyers as cover, flying a path that no pilot without precognitive abilities could have managed. It latched onto the Infinity's hull near the main hangar bay, and the Dark Lord of the Sith stepped into humanity's most advanced warship. He could feel it immediately. The absence, the void where the Force should flow. But also something else. Potential. Raw, untapped, unaware of its own existence. These beings had the Force within them, as all living things did. But they had never learned to touch it, never known it existed. That made them blind, vulnerable. Stormtroopers followed him as he strode through the corridors, cutting down Marines with casual efficiency. His lightsaber was a red blur, deflecting bullets, severing limbs, opening the path forward. Behind him, his Inquisitors, those who had survived, formed a deadly wedge. The Marines fought with courage that Vader recognized and respected. They died anyway, until they reached Hangar Bay 3 and found themselves facing something Vader had never encountered. 4 armored figures, taller than any human had right to be, weapons trained with perfect discipline. Their presence in the Force was strange, not absent like droids, but muted, as if something in their very being dampened the Force's touch. Fire Team Osiris had arrived. Spartan. Locke took point, his MA-5D assault rifle aimed center mass at Vader. Beside him, Edward Buck chambered a round in his M90 shotgun. Holly Tanaka aimed her DMR from a flanking position, and Olympia Vale, the team's linguist and diplomat, kept her weapon ready but voice calm. "That's far enough," Locke said, his voice amplified through his helmet. "You're in violation of UNSC military protocols. Stand down and surrender, or we will use lethal force." Vader regarded them with something approximating interest. These warriors, these Spartans, if his intercepted communications were correct, they were enhanced, augmented beyond normal human capability. And yet they knew nothing of the Force, nothing of the power that flowed through all living things. "You are impressive," Vader said, his voice carrying easily despite the respirator. "But you cannot stop me. You lack the understanding of what you truly face." He raised his hand, and the force gathered like a storm. Locke's combat. Awareness screamed danger half a second before Vader unleashed it. He threw himself aside as telekinetic force tore through the space where he'd been standing, denting the bulkhead behind him. Buck opened fire, his shotgun booming, but Vader's lightsaber was already moving, deflecting the pellets with impossible precision. Then the Spartans did what they'd been trained to do since childhood. They adapted. Tanaka's DMR cracked, not aiming at Vader but at the support beam above his head. The structure groaned and began to collapse. Vader was forced to use the force to hold it up, dividing his attention. Vale took advantage of the opening, her grenades arcing through the air with perfect trajectory. The explosions forced Vader back a step. Just one. But it was enough to show that he could be pressured, could be made to react rather than act. "He's using some kind of energy manipulation," Roland said in their HUDs. "Telekinesis, maybe low-level reality warping. But he's not invincible. Keep him off balance, don't let him focus." Buck charged, augmented strength driving him forward faster than any normal human could move. Vader's lightsaber came up to strike, but Buck had already compensated, dropping into a slide that carried him under the blade. He came up behind Vader, shotgun pressed against the Dark Lord's back, and fired. The blast should have torn through armor and spine. Instead, it detonated against some kind of energy field, an invisible barrier that absorbed most of the impact, but not all of it. Vader staggered, his concentration broken, and in that moment, Locke moved. He closed the distance in 3 augmented strides, his combat knife drawn. Vader sensed him, how could he not? And turned, lightsaber slashing. Locke took the hit on his energy shield, which flared and died, but got inside Vader's guard. His knife found the gap between armor plates, sinking into Vader's side. The Dark Lord's bellow of pain and rage shook the hangar. He threw Locke back with telekinetic force, sending the Spartan crashing through a support pillar. But the damage was done. Vader was injured, his breathing ragged, his movements less certain. For the first time in years, Darth Vader felt something he'd almost forgotten: doubt. These warriors fought without the Force, without precognition, without any of the advantages he'd come to rely upon. And yet they were pushing him back through pure skill, coordination, and technology. "Lord Vader," the Grand Inquisitor's voice came through the comm, urgent. "Our forces are being pushed back. The ship's defenders are too strong. We must retreat." Vader wanted to refuse, wanted to stay and crush these Spartans, to prove that the Force was superior to any technology. But he was not foolish. He was injured. His Inquisitors were defeated or dead, and the Emperor would not forgive failure born from pride. He reached out with the Force one last time, pulling a fighter craft from its moorings and sending it hurtling toward the Spartans. They scattered, and in that moment of distraction, Vader retreated to his shuttle. "This is not over," he promised, his voice carrying across the hangar. "We will meet again, and next time I will be prepared." The assault shuttle detached and fled, racing back toward the Executor. On the Infinity's bridge, Lasky watched the Imperial fleet beginning to withdraw. They'd bloodied the Empire, proven they couldn't be easily conquered. But he'd also seen the cost, the casualties, the damage, the resources expended in a single engagement. "Status report," he ordered, his voice tired. "Shields regenerating, hull breaches being sealed, casualties are—" Roland paused. 73 dead, 216 wounded. We captured 12 enemy combatants, including 2 of those Force users. The rest of their boarding parties are dead or retreated. 73. Lasky closed his eyes briefly, adding those names to the too long list he already carried. "And the enemy? We destroyed or crippled 8 Star Destroyers. Casualty estimates on their side are in the tens of thousands." Roland's voice was flat. "Captain, we just fought a battle that would have been a major engagement in the Covenant War. And to them, this was a skirmish, a probe. They've got hundreds more ships where these came from." The implication hung heavy. They'd won this battle. But the war, if it came to war, was unwinnable through firepower alone. Palmer appeared on the bridge, removing her helmet. "Spartans are reporting all clear. We've got 2 prisoners that should interest you, Force users, same as the one in black armor. They'll need medical attention, but they'll live." "Good. Maybe we can learn something from them." Lasky turned to face his crew. They were exhausted, bloodied, but still standing, still ready. "All departments, begin damage control. We need to get the Infinity back to full combat readiness as quickly as possible. Roland, plot a course away from Imperial space. Find us somewhere we can make repairs without being attacked." "Already working on it. Though, Captain, I should mention, I've been monitoring communications across this region of space. The Empire isn't the only major faction. There's a resistance movement, calls themselves the Rebel Alliance. They're fighting the Empire, and they just sent out a general broadcast trying to make contact with us." Lasky considered that. An enemy of their enemy. Potentially an ally. Or potentially another threat trying to use them for their own purposes. "Get me that transmission," he decided. "Let's hear what they have to say." The view screen shifted, displaying a recorded message. The woman who appeared was young, regal, her bearing that of someone born to authority but tempered by hardship. She wore white robes that somehow managed to look both diplomatic and practical. "Unknown vessel. This is Princess Leia Organa of Alderaan, representing the Alliance to Restore the Republic. We observed your engagement with Imperial forces. We understand you may be as surprised by this galaxy as we are by your presence. We do not know who you are or where you come from, but we offer you this: sanctuary, information, and the possibility of alliance against a common enemy. If you seek to understand this galaxy, to find your way home, or simply to survive, we may be able to help each other. These are coordinates for a neutral meeting place. Come if you wish. We will be waiting." The message ended. Lasky stared at the coordinates, weighing options. The Empire had proven hostile immediately. These rebels were offering an olive branch. But could they be trusted? What would they want in exchange for their help? "Sir?" Palmer prompted. Lasky made his decision. "Set course for those coordinates, but we go in ready for anything. Full tactical alert. If this is a trap, we'll be ready for it." "Aye, Captain." As the Infinity's engines powered up and the ship began moving away from the battlefield, Lasky stood at the viewport, watching the stars. Somewhere out there, Darth Vader was licking his wounds and planning his next move. The Empire was mobilizing, and the UNSC was caught in the middle of a galactic civil war they didn't understand and hadn't chosen. But they would adapt, survive, find a way home. Because that's what humanity did best. Even when the odds were impossible, even when the enemy had literal magic on their side, even when they were alone in a hostile galaxy, they endured. "Roland," Lasky said quietly, "send a message back to the rebels. Tell them we accept their offer to talk, but make it clear, we're not anyone's weapon. We're not here to fight their war. We just want to go home." Sending now. The Infinity jumped to slip space, leaving behind a debris field and a galaxy that would never be quite the same, because the UNSC had arrived, and nothing in the Star Wars galaxy was prepared for what that meant. The Redemption, a modified MC-80 Star Cruiser serving as the Rebel Alliance's mobile command center, hung in the shadow of a barren moon, its sensors sweeping space for any sign of Imperial pursuit. On the bridge, Princess Leia Organa stood with her hands clasped behind her back, projecting calm confidence despite the anxiety coiling in her stomach. Beside her, Admiral Akbar studied the tactical displays with his characteristic thoroughness, his salmon-colored Mon Calamari features creased in concentration. "They should have arrived by now, Princess. Perhaps they reconsidered." "They'll come," Leia said with more certainty than she felt. "Did you see what they did to that Imperial fleet? 8 Star Destroyers destroyed or crippled in a single engagement. Vader himself was forced to retreat. They're powerful, yes, but they're also alone in hostile space. They need allies as much as we need them. Or they need nothing at all." General Riken appeared on her other side, his weathered face skeptical. A ship that powerful could simply take what it wants: resources, information, territory. We may be inviting a new oppressor simply because it isn't the empire we know. Leia turned to face him, her diplomatic training allowing her to keep her voice level despite her frustration. We can't know their intentions until we speak with them, and we can't afford to pass up an opportunity like this. The Empire has overwhelming force. If we can convince this unknown ship to even remain neutral, to not ally with the Empire, that's a victory. Before Riken could respond, the sensor officer called out urgently, "Contact! Massive spatial distortion at bearing 273. Whatever their method of faster-than-light travel is, it's nothing like hyperspace. It's tearing through normal space like..." The view screen flared as the UNSC Infinity dropped out of slip space. Even having seen the sensor data, even having reviewed the captured Imperial recordings of the initial engagement, nothing prepared the rebel command staff for the reality of the ship's presence. It was enormous, larger than any vessel in the rebel fleet, bristling with weapons that made even Mon Calamari star cruisers look underarmed. "By the Force," Akbar breathed. "That's a city, not a ship." Leia straightened her spine, refusing to be intimidated. She'd faced down Darth Vader, had stood before the Imperial Senate and challenged their lies, had watched her homeworld die and continued fighting. One impressive warship wouldn't shake her. "Hail them," she ordered. "Let's see who we're dealing with." On the Infinity's bridge, Captain Lasky studied the rebel fleet through narrowed eyes. It was a motley collection. Mon Calamari cruisers, Corellian corvettes, converted civilian vessels pressed into military service. Nothing that could threaten the Infinity, but also nothing that suggested these rebels were reckless or foolish. They'd positioned their forces defensively, weapons powered but not locked, ready to flee if necessary. Smart, cautious, exactly what he'd do in their position. "Incoming transmission," Roland reported. "Audio and visual. They're using a more sophisticated communication protocol than the Empire, adaptive encryption, multi-band redundancy. These people know what they're doing. Put it through." The view screen shifted to display Princess Leia, flanked by her command staff. Lasky took her measure in the seconds before she spoke. Young, probably mid-20s, but carrying herself with the authority of someone who'd been trained for leadership since childhood. Her eyes were intelligent, assessing, and showed the weight of experience that came from surviving in wartime. She reminded him, uncomfortably, of every officer he'd seen age too fast during the Covenant War. When Leia spoke, her voice was clear and diplomatic. "I am Princess Leia Organa of Alderaan, representing the Alliance to restore the Republic. On behalf of the Alliance, I welcome you and thank you for accepting our invitation to meet. I understand you've had unfortunate first contact with the Galactic Empire. I hope we can demonstrate that not all civilizations in this galaxy greet newcomers with violence." Lasky appreciated the careful phrasing, acknowledging the Empire's aggression while positioning the rebels as different without being preachy about it. He'd dealt with enough politicians to recognize skill when he saw it. "Captain Thomas Lasky, commanding officer of the UNSC Infinity. Princess, I'll be direct. We're in a difficult position. We're far from home, in unknown space, surrounded by hostile forces. Your Empire attacked us without provocation or attempt at communication. Can you give me a reason to trust that your alliance will be different?" "Only this," Leia replied without hesitation. "The Empire rules through fear and overwhelming force. We fight because we believe in freedom, in the right of people to determine their own futures. We don't demand your allegiance, Captain. We offer information, assistance, and the possibility of mutual benefit. What you do with that offer is entirely your choice." Behind Lasky, Commander Palmer leaned in to whisper, "She's good. Almost makes me believe it." "Almost," Lasky murmured back. "Everyone wants something. Question is what?" Lasky nodded slightly, then addressed Leia again. "Princess, I appreciate your offer. But before we proceed, I need to understand exactly what we've stepped into. This empire, how large is it? What kind of threat are we facing? And what is this force that keeps being mentioned in communications we've intercepted? A flicker of surprise crossed Leia's features at the bluntness of the questions, quickly replaced by something that might have been respect. Those are extensive questions, Captain. Perhaps it would be better to discuss them in person. I can arrange for a shuttle to transport me to your vessel, or you're welcome to send representatives to the Redemption. Face-to-face conversation tends to build trust more effectively than view screens. Lasky considered. Allowing outsiders aboard the Infinity was a security risk, but sending representatives to the rebel ship left them vulnerable to hostage-taking or ambush. Both options carried dangers. Then again, they'd survived worse odds during the Covenant War by taking calculated risks. We'll meet on neutral ground, he decided. Roland, is that moon in sensor range habitable? Barely, the AI responded, materializing in the holotank. Thin atmosphere, minimal gravity, no indigenous life, but it'll support humans for short-term exposure with standard equipment. Perfect. Princess, we'll meet you on the moon's surface in 1 hour. Small security details on both sides, say 5 personnel each. We can talk openly without either of us feeling compromised. Leia smiled, a genuine expression that briefly made her look her actual age rather than the hardened leader she'd become. Agreed, Captain. 1 hour. I look forward to our discussion. The transmission ended. Palmer moved to Lasky's side, already planning. I'm going with you. Full Spartan fire team. Osiris will provide security. The Spartans might intimidate them, Lasky pointed out. Good. Let them see what they're dealing with if this turns hostile. Besides, after what Locke's team did to Vader, I think our Spartans have earned the right to stand guard. Lasky allowed himself a slight smile. Fair point. All right, Palmer. You, me, Roland's avatar, and fire team's Osiris. Let's go meet the rebels and see if they're genuinely different from the Empire, or just better at hiding their true intentions. The moon's surface was exactly as inhospitable as Roland had promised. Gray dust, jagged rocks, and a thin atmosphere that turned the stars above into sharp pinpoints of light. The Pelican dropship settled onto the surface with practiced ease, its armored hull, proof against anything short of heavy anti-aircraft fire. The ramp lowered, and Captain Lasky descended, flanked by the 4 Spartans of Fire Team Osiris. Even in the reduced gravity, their armor made them imposing, each standing over 7 feet tall, bristling with weapons, their faceplates reflecting the harsh light. Jameson Locke took point, his MA-5D assault rifle held in a ready carry that could snap to firing position in a heartbeat. Edward Buck covered their 6, his shotgun and easy confidence suggesting he'd done this 1,000 times before. Holly Tanaka scanned with her DMR, her helmet sensors tracking everything that moved, and Olympia Vale walked beside Lasky, her linguistic training and diplomatic experience making her ideal for first contact situations. 100 meters away, a Lambda-class shuttle touched down, and the rebel delegation emerged. Princess Leia walked with the same confidence she'd projected on the view screen, now dressed in practical field clothing rather than formal robes. Behind her came Admiral Akbar, his distinctive features even more striking in person. A human male in general's uniform. Raikhan, Lasky assumed from his bearing. And 2 guards in rebel trooper armor, carrying blaster rifles but with fingers carefully away from triggers. The 2 groups met in the middle, separated by a respectful 10 meters. For a moment, no one spoke. Humans and Mon Calamari studied Spartans and enhanced soldiers. Technologies separated by galaxies assessed each other across wind-swept dust. Then Leia stepped forward, her hands visible and empty, and offered a slight bow. Captain Lasky, thank you for meeting us. I hope this gesture demonstrates our sincerity. Lasky returned the bow, appreciating the formality. Princess, these are my security personnel and advisors. I hope you'll understand the precautions. We've learned to be careful when meeting new civilizations. Of course, and I hope you'll understand ours. Leia gestured to her companions. Admiral Akbar, commanding officer of our fleet. General Rikan, Alliance Command. And our security detail. Akbar stepped forward, his large eyes studying the Spartans with open fascination. Remarkable. I've analyzed the sensor data from your engagement with the Imperial fleet. Your weapons technology is extraordinary. Kinetic projectiles at relativistic speeds. We abandoned such weapons centuries ago in favor of energy-based systems. Your approach is brutally effective. We learned to be pragmatic during our war, Lasky replied carefully. When you're fighting for survival, you use what works. Your war. Leia's attention sharpened. You mentioned being far from home. Can you tell us what happened? Lasky exchanged glances with Palmer, who gave a slight nod. They discussed this. How much to reveal? How much to hold back? They needed allies, but they also needed to maintain tactical advantage. We're from a civilization called the United Nations, Space Command, Lasky began. We fought a war that lasted nearly 3 decades against an alliance of alien species called the Covenant. They were technologically superior, religiously fanatical, and committed to our extinction. We lost billions of people, entire planets glassed from orbit, colonies wiped out. We survived through a combination of luck, desperation, and soldiers willing to pay any price to protect humanity. He paused, watching their reactions. Leia's expression had softened with something like recognition, the look of someone who understood loss on that scale. Akbar's features showed respect. Rayekin remained skeptical but listening. The Infinity was supposed to be our answer to the Covenant's overwhelming numbers, Lasky continued. The most advanced warship humanity ever built. We were conducting operations against Covenant remnants when something went wrong with our faster-than-light systems. We ended up here, in your galaxy, with no way home that we've been able to determine. And the Empire attacked you immediately, Leia said, her voice carrying quiet anger. Of course they did. They see anything they can't control as a threat, anything powerful as something to be conquered or destroyed. Which brings us to my questions, Lasky pressed. How large is this empire? What kind of force could they bring against us? And what exactly is this force that keeps being mentioned? Your people talk about it like some kind of energy field, but our sensors can't detect anything matching conventional physics. Leia took a breath, clearly organizing her thoughts. The Galactic Empire controls most of the known galaxy. Thousands of star systems, trillions of beings. Their military is vast. Thousands of star destroyers, millions of stormtroopers, resources beyond measure. What you faced was a probing force, Captain, a fraction of their true strength. The weight of that statement settled over the UNSC delegation. They destroyed 8 star destroyers and thought it significant. To learn it was barely a footnote in Imperial calculations. And the force? Lasky asked, already dreading the answer. This time it was Riken who responded, his voice carrying the tone of someone explaining uncomfortable facts. The Force is an energy field generated by all living things. It binds the galaxy together. Some individuals, Jedi, Sith, and other Force sensitives, can sense and manipulate it. They can see the future, move objects without touching them, influence weak minds, even predict attacks before they happen. Magic, Palmer said flatly. You're telling us they have magic. It's not magic, Leia corrected gently. It's a natural phenomenon, as real as gravity or electromagnetism. Just one your civilization apparently never encountered. The Jedi used to be peacekeepers, guardians of the Republic for thousands of generations. But the Empire hunted them down, exterminated them. Now the only Force users who remain are those serving the Empire, Inquisitors who hunt any remaining Jedi, and Darth Vader himself. The one in the black armor, Locke said, speaking for the first time. We fought him. He's dangerous, fast, strong, precognitive abilities that let him react to attacks before they happen, but not invincible. We hurt him, made him retreat. Akbar's eyes widened. You injured Vader? That's unprecedented. He's destroyed entire rebel cells single-handedly. For you to have forced him to retreat, that changes the entire tactical calculation. How? Lasky asked sharply. Because it means Force users aren't unstoppable, Riken said, and for the first time something like hope entered his expression. The Empire relies on Vader and his Inquisitors to inspire fear, to seem invincible. If your soldiers can counter Force abilities through tactics and technology, that's a vulnerability we've never been able to exploit. Don't get too excited, Palmer warned. It cost us casualties and we still barely drove him off. Whatever this Force is, it's a real tactical advantage. Our soldiers can't see the future, can't move objects with their minds. We're at a disadvantage that firepower alone can't completely overcome. Perhaps, Leia said thoughtfully. But you have advantages they don't. Your technology is generations ahead of anything in this galaxy. Your soldiers, these Spartans, they're enhanced somehow, aren't they? Not just armor, but the individuals inside it. Vale stepped forward, her training as both warrior and diplomat shining through. The Spartan program began during our war with the Covenant. Genetic augmentation, neural enhancement, specialized training from childhood. We were designed to be humanity's protectors, our best chance against enemies that were stronger and more advanced. It's not magic, it's science, but it's effective. And controversial, I imagine, Leia said softly. Taking children, modifying them, turning them into weapons. That carries a moral weight. It does, Vale agreed without flinching. Every Spartan knows what was done to them and why. We've all made peace with it in our own ways. We're soldiers. We protect humanity. That purpose gives meaning to the sacrifices that were made. The honesty seemed to affect Leia. She studied Vale for a long moment, then nodded slowly. I understand purpose. I've sacrificed too. Watched my homeworld die, lost people I loved, done things I'm not proud of because the cause demanded it. War makes monsters of us all, or it makes us fight to preserve what little humanity remains. I choose to believe your people chose the latter. That's what we're trying to do, Lasky said quietly. Every day. But Princess, we need information. We need to understand this galaxy, its politics, its technology. We need navigation data so we can map slipspace routes that might get us home. And we need allies who won't try to conquer or destroy us on sight. And what will you offer in exchange? Rieken asked, his skepticism returning. You're asking for significant resources and intelligence. What does the Alliance gain? It was the question Lasky had been waiting for. The moment of truth where interests had to align or alliance would remain impossible. We offer technological consultation, he said carefully. Not weapons. We won't just hand over Mac gun technology or Spartan augmentation protocols, but we can share principles, help you understand concepts that might advance your defensive capabilities. We offer tactical coordination. If the Empire attacks either of us, we can support each other. And we offer this. We'll never ally with the Empire. We'll never help them conquer this galaxy. As long as we're here, they'll have to account for us as an independent force they can't control. That's not nothing, Akbar admitted. The Empire's greatest strength is that resistance seems futile. Having a force as powerful as the Infinity operating independently, that changes the perception. It gives hope. Hope is our most precious resource, Leia said. It's what keeps the rebellion alive when the odds are overwhelming. If your presence can give people hope that the Empire isn't invincible, that's worth more than any weapon. Lasky felt the conversation reaching a critical point. Then we have the basis for cooperation. Let's be clear about terms. We're not joining your rebellion. We don't have the authority to commit humanity to your war. And we don't know enough about this galaxy's politics to choose sides definitively. But we'll share information, coordinate against the Empire when our interests align, and help each other survive. A pragmatic alliance, Leia said. I can work with that. General? Rieken looked like he wanted to argue, to demand more, but he was experienced enough to recognize when pushing would achieve nothing. Agreed. We'll provide star charts, intelligence on Imperial deployments, and information about the Force. In exchange, you share what you can about your technology and coordinate with our forces when facing Imperial threats. One more thing, Leia added, her expression becoming more serious. There's someone I'd like you to meet. Someone who can explain the Force better than any of us. He's not officially part of the rebellion, but he's an ally. A Jedi Knight named Luke Skywalker. The name meant nothing to Lasky, but Akbar and Riken both reacted. Subtle stiffening, exchanged glances that spoke of significance. A Jedi? Lasky asked. I thought you said the Empire hunted them down. They did. Luke is one of the last, and he's the one who destroyed the Empire's ultimate weapon, the Death Star. A space station the size of a small moon, capable of destroying entire planets. He led the attack that destroyed it, and he did it through a combination of skill, courage, and the Force. Lasky felt something cold settle in his stomach, a weapon that could destroy planets. The Covenant had glassed worlds, but this sounded like something on another scale entirely. You're telling me the Empire had the ability to obliterate planets and your friend destroyed it? 2 years ago, Leia confirmed. It's why the Emperor built a second one, and why we're desperately fighting to stop it before it becomes operational. A second one, Palmer repeated. Of course there is, because one planet-killing superweapon wasn't enough. Welcome to the war against the Empire, Riken said with dark humor, where the battles are endless and the enemy's resources are infinite. Still interested in cooperating? Lasky looked at his Spartans, at Palmer, at the rebels standing across from him in the gray dust of an anonymous moon. He thought about the Infinity, about his crew, about the responsibility of keeping them alive in hostile space. He thought about the war they'd already fought, the sacrifices already made, and the prospect of being drawn into yet another conflict. Then he thought about an empire that ruled through fear, that built weapons to destroy planets, that attacked without provocation or mercy. He'd fought the Covenant because they left humanity no choice. It seemed history was determined to repeat itself. We're interested, he said finally. Set up the meeting with your Jedi. Let's learn everything we can about this Force, because if we're going to survive in this galaxy, we need to understand what we're facing. Leia extended her hand in the gesture she'd learned meant agreement in human cultures. Lasky took it, and they shook. Two leaders from different galaxies, united by necessity and the hope that working together might let them both survive. Welcome to the rebellion, Captain Lasky, Leia said with a slight smile, even if you won't officially join it. Welcome to the UNSC's sphere of interest, Princess, Lasky replied. Even if we won't officially commit to your war. They both understood the careful dance they were performing, cooperation without complete trust, alliance without surrender of sovereignty. It wasn't ideal, but in war, the ideal was rarely possible. Survival required pragmatism, and both the rebellion and the UNSC had learned that lesson through hard experience. As the two delegations returned to their ships, beginning the complex process of establishing formal communication protocols and intelligence sharing, neither side noticed the small probe drifting in high orbit above the moon. Imperial design. Advanced sensors recording everything. Vader had not come himself, but he was watching, learning, planning. The game had moved into its next phase, and the Dark Lord of the Sith was patient, methodical, and absolutely determined to claim the Infinity's technology for the Empire, one way or another. 3 weeks after the moon meeting, the UNSC Infinity hung in high orbit above Sullust, a volcanic world that served as one of the rebellion's hidden staging areas. Below, rebel engineers studied UNSC technical specifications with fascination, while their UNSC counterparts examined rebel hyperdrive technology with equal interest. The exchange was carefully managed, neither side revealing their deepest secrets, but both learning enough to appreciate what the other brought to the table. On the Infinity's observation deck, Captain Lasky stood watching the planet's red-tinged surface when he sensed someone approaching. Not heard, sensed. It was a feeling he'd started experiencing more frequently since meeting the rebels, a prickling awareness that defied explanation. He turned to find a young man in black clothing approaching with confident strides. blonde hair, blue eyes that carried weight beyond his apparent years, and a lightsaber hanging from his belt. The weapon was unmistakable, even to someone from another galaxy. A cylinder that housed destructive potential wrapped in elegant simplicity. Luke Skywalker had arrived. "Captain Lasky." Luke extended his hand with an openness that seemed almost naive given the galaxy's brutality. "I'm Luke. Sorry it took so long to meet. I've been training with Master Yoda, and getting away isn't always easy." Lasky shook his hand, studying the young Jedi with professional assessment. Early 20s, physically fit, but not military trained in the conventional sense, and carrying himself with the peculiar confidence of someone who'd faced death and survived through a combination of skill and something less tangible. "Commander Palmer told me you were coming," Lasky said, gesturing to the seating area nearby. "She also mentioned you're supposedly one of the most dangerous people in the galaxy, despite looking like you should be attending university somewhere." Luke laughed, and the sound was genuine, unforced. "I get that a lot. Vader said something similar before I told him I was his son, and we tried to kill each other. Family reunions in my life are complicated." The casual mention of that revelation made Lasky blink. "You're related to Vader?" "Unfortunately, my father was a Jedi named Anakin Skywalker before he fell to the dark side and became the Empire's enforcer. Long story, lots of tragedy, and I'm still processing most of it." Luke's expression turned more serious. "But that's not why I'm here. Leia said you wanted to understand the Force, that your people have never encountered it before." "That's right. Our universe apparently doesn't have it, or if it does, we've never detected it or learned to use it. But we've seen what it can do. Vader nearly killed my Spartans through precognition and telekinesis alone. We need to understand what we're facing." Luke nodded slowly, his hand unconsciously touching his lightsaber. "The Force it's hard to explain to someone who can't feel it. Imagine if you could sense the emotions of everyone around you, feel the connections between all living things, see possibilities of what might happen if you make certain choices. It's like having another sense beyond the standard 5, one that connects you to everything that exists." "That sounds like sensory overload," Lasky observed. "It can be. Training helps you filter, focus, understand what you're sensing without being overwhelmed. But the real power comes from learning to touch the Force, to channel it through yourself." Luke raised his hand, and across the room a datapad lifted from a table, floating through the air to settle gently in his palm. Telekinesis, one of the most basic applications, but there's also enhanced reflexes, limited precognition, mind influence on the weak-willed, force healing, and dozens of other abilities depending on training and natural aptitude. Lasky watched the casual display of what should have been impossible physics. "Our scientists are going to lose their minds trying to figure out how you just violated conservation of energy." "The Force doesn't follow your physics," Luke said simply. "It's something else, something deeper. Obi-Wan, my first teacher, used to say it was an energy field created by all living things, that it surrounds us, penetrates us, binds the galaxy together. Master Yoda goes further, says we're luminous beings, not just crude matter, and the Force is our connection to that luminosity." Sounds philosophical. It is, but it's also practical. In combat, a Jedi can react before their opponent acts because they sense intention through the Force. They can deflect blaster bolts because they see where the shots will be fired before the trigger is pulled. They can influence outcomes because they perceive probabilities and make choices that shift events toward preferred futures. The implications were staggering from a tactical standpoint. Lasky's mind raced through scenarios, trying to calculate how to counter enemies with such advantages. "But it's not infallible," he said, remembering the reports from Fire Team Osiris. "My Spartans hurt Vader, forced him to retreat. If the Force made you invincible, that wouldn't have been possible." Luke's expression became thoughtful, almost impressed. "That's what fascinates me about your people. You don't have the Force. I can barely sense you in it, like you're muted somehow. But you've developed technology and training that compensates. Your Spartans move fast enough and think tactically enough that even precognition provides limited advantage. They don't rely on one approach. They adapt, coordinate, exploit openings. That's incredibly dangerous to Force users who've come to depend on their abilities. We learned to adapt during the Covenant War, Lasky explained. We faced enemies who were physically superior, technologically advanced, and had energy shields that made them nearly invulnerable. We survived by being unpredictable, by using tactics they didn't expect, by never giving them a comfortable pattern to exploit. Sounds like the same principles apply to fighting Force users. They do. But there's something else. Luke leaned forward, his expression intense. Captain, when I meditate on the Force, when I look at possible futures, your ship, it's like a blank spot. I can sense futures where the rebellion fights the Empire, where Vader and I confront each other, where the second Death Star is completed or destroyed. But in those futures, the Infinity is just absent. Like the Force can't predict what you'll do or how you'll affect events. That made Lasky uncomfortable in ways he couldn't quite articulate. Is that unusual? Extremely. Even droids, which don't have the Force themselves, affect the living beings around them in ways that create ripples. But you, your crew, your ship, your technology, it's like you exist outside the normal flow of cause and effect that governs this galaxy. You're a variable the Force can't account for. Is that good or bad? Luke's smile was wry. Depends on your perspective. For the Empire, it's terrifying. For the Rebellion, it's potentially miraculous. For the Force itself, he trailed off, searching for words. I don't know. Master Yoda says the Force has a will, that it guides events toward balance between light and dark. Having something it can't guide might disturb that balance, or it might be exactly what the balance needs. Before Lasky could respond to that philosophical complexity, Commander Palmer entered the observation deck with Spartan Locke beside her. Captain, sorry to interrupt, Palmer said, though her expression suggested she wasn't sorry at all. We've got a situation. Rebel intelligence just picked up Imperial communications. They're moving a fleet toward a manufacturing world called Fondor. Major shipyards there. The rebels have been trying to raid them for months. But this time, the Empire's bringing overwhelming force. They're planning to use the attack as bait. Bait for what? Lasky asked, already knowing the answer. For us, Locke confirmed. Intelligence intercepts mention the unknown vessel specifically. Vader's convinced the rebels will ask for our help, and he's prepared a trap. 3 full battle groups, interdiction fields to prevent escape, and Vader himself commanding from the Executor. Luke stood, his hand going to his lightsaber. How many ships? 60+ Star Destroyers, Palmer said flatly. Hundreds of support vessels, TIE fighter wings numbering in the tens of thousands. It's not just bait, it's an anvil. They're going to crush any rebel force that shows up, and if we come to help, they'll try to capture or destroy the Infinity. Lasky moved to the tactical display, calling up the data. The Imperial deployment was massive, professional, designed to leave no escape routes. This wasn't a patrol or even a standard military operation. This was a deliberate trap baited with the destruction of a valuable rebel target. The question was, did they take the bait? What are the rebels planning? He asked. Mon Mothma wants to avoid it entirely, Palmer replied. Says it's too obvious a trap, that we'd be throwing lives away. But Akbar is arguing the opposite. Says if we don't defend Fondor, we send a message that the Empire can threaten any world and we'll back down. Leia's somewhere in the middle, trying to find a third option. There's always a third option, Lasky said quietly, his command experience guiding his thinking. We just have to find it. Luke, if you were planning this operation, knowing the Empire's prepared a trap, how would you approach it? The young Jedi considered, his eyes distant as if consulting that mystical force for guidance. Hit them where they're not looking. The Empire's concentrated force at Fondor means they've weakened somewhere else. Find that weakness, strike there, force them to. Choose between defending multiple targets simultaneously. Divide their attention, Locke agreed. Classic special operations doctrine. You can't defend everywhere at once. Make them spread out, then hit them hard where they're thin. But that requires knowing where they're weak, Lasky pointed out. Do we have that intelligence? Actually, Roland's voice came through the ship's comm system, his avatar materializing on the tactical display. I might have found something. I've been analyzing Imperial fleet movements and communication patterns for the past 3 weeks. There's a research facility on Scarif, heavily defended, but not with capital ships. Mostly ground forces and orbital shields. Based on encrypted traffic, they're working on something big. Something related to the Death Star project. The room went silent. Everyone understood what that meant. If the Empire was researching Death Star technology at Scarif, the data there could be invaluable, either for destroying the second Death Star or preventing future planet killers from being built. That's it, Lasky decided. That's our third option. The Empire wants us to show up at Fondor where they're prepared. Fine, we'll hit Scarif instead, somewhere they're not expecting assault by a force our size. We get the Death Star plans, we weaken the Empire strategically, and we avoid the trap. The rebels will need to know, Palmer said. Then let's go tell them. The rebel command ship's briefing room was crowded with Mon Mothma's calm authority, Akbar's tactical brilliance, Ria Khan's experience, and Leia's diplomatic insight, all focused on the holo projection displaying Scarif's planetary defenses. The orbital shield is the primary obstacle, Akbar explained, his gravelly voice carrying across the room. It's a planetary deflector that prevents any ships from entering or leaving once activated. To get your ground forces in, we'd need to disable the shield generator. Which means a space battle, Riken added. Scarif is defended by 2 Star Destroyers and an orbital command station. Not insurmountable, but it'll be costly. Lasky studied the display, his tactical mind already formulating approaches. The Infinity can handle 2 Star Destroyers. We've proven that. The question is whether we can disable the shield fast enough to insert ground forces before Imperial reinforcements arrive. How fast can your people move? Leia asked. Pelican dropships can deploy a full assault force in minutes once we've got a LZ, Palmer replied. But ground assault on a heavily defended installation, that's going to be infantry work. Room clearing, data extraction, fighting through defensive positions. It'll take time even with Spartans leading the assault. Then we buy you that time, Mon Mothma said, her serene expression betraying no doubt despite the risks. The rebel fleet will engage the orbital defenses. Your Infinity can focus on destroying the Star Destroyers and suppressing the defensive platforms. Once the shield is down, your forces go in, get the Death Star plans, and get out. Before the Empire can respond in force, Lasky finished. It's workable. Risky, but workable. Luke had been quiet during most of the planning, but now he spoke up. I'm going with a ground assault. The Force is telling me I need to be there. I can't explain why, but it's important. You're not a soldier, Palmer objected immediately. You're a valuable asset. If you get killed on Scarif, then the Force will guide someone else, Luke interrupted, his voice carrying unexpected steel. I've learned to trust these feelings, Commander. They've saved my life more times than I can count. I'm going. Leia exchanged glances with Mon Mothma, some unspoken communication passing between them. If Luke says he needs to be there, I trust him. But he'll need support. I'll lead the rebel ground contingent. Absolutely not, Riken said immediately. Princess, you're too important to risk on a ground assault. Which is exactly why I'm going, Leia replied with quiet finality. The people need to see their leaders willing to take the same risks they do. And I'm not helpless. I've fought alongside soldiers before. The argument that followed was brief but intense, ending only when Mon Mothma raised a hand for silence. Princess Leia will accompany the ground forces, she decided, as will Jedi Skywalker. This operation is too important, and their presence may provide advantages we can't anticipate. Captain Lasky, Commander Palmer, they'll be under your command structure for the duration of the mission. Keep them alive. We'll do our best, Lasky promised, though he wasn't thrilled about babysitting royalty and a Jedi during a combat operation. The briefing continued for another hour, hammering out details, contingencies, and coordination protocols. By the end, they had a plan that was audacious, dangerous, and potentially decisive. If it worked, they'd deal a significant blow to the Empire's ultimate weapon program. If it failed, they'd lose the Rebel fleet's best forces and possibly the Infinity itself. "One more thing," Lasky said as the briefing concluded. "Vader, he's at Fondor, right? Part of the trap there." "According to intelligence, yes," Akbar confirmed. "Good. Then he won't be at Scarif when we hit it. That's one less nightmare we have to deal with." Everyone nodded agreement, the room clearing as commanders moved to prepare their forces. No one noticed Luke's troubled expression, the way his hand unconsciously touched his lightsaber, the sense through the Force that something was coming, something significant, and that Vader's absence from Scarif might not be the advantage they thought. The Force was moving in ways even a Jedi couldn't fully predict, and when it involved beings from outside this galaxy, even destiny itself had to improvise. The assault fleet assembled in the shadow of a dying star, the Infinity at its center, surrounded by Mon Calamari cruisers, Corellian corvettes, and a motley collection of rebel vessels that represented every world willing to fight the Empire. On the Infinity's hangar deck, Fire Team Osiris performed final weapons checks alongside rebel commandos who stared at the Spartans with barely concealed awe. Luke and Leia stood nearby, the princess checking her blaster while the Jedi meditated, his consciousness touching the Force, seeking guidance for the battle ahead. Locke approached them, his armor reflecting the hangar's harsh lights. "Skywalker Organa, you'll be in the second wave with Spartans Tanaka and Vale. Buck and I will clear the initial LZ. Stay behind us, follow our movement patterns, and don't try to be heroes. We're professionals at this. Let us do our job." Luke opened his eyes, and something in them made even the Spartan pause. "I appreciate the concern, Spartan Locke, but I've been in combat before. I destroyed the Death Star, remember? I can handle myself." "Destroying a battle station is different from room clearing under fire," Locke replied evenly. "No disrespect to your abilities, but ground combat has its own rules. Follow them, and we'll all get home." "He's right, Luke," Leia said, her tone brooking no argument. "We're guests on this operation. Let the professionals lead." Luke nodded reluctantly, trusting their experience, if not entirely agreeing with their assessment of his capabilities. Across the hangar, Captain Lasky stood on an observation platform, watching the organized chaos of deployment preparation. Beside him, Roland's avatar flickered, processing data streams from 1,000 sources. "Fleet is ready, Captain," the AI reported. "Rebel commanders are in position. Spartans are armed and dangerous, though that's their default state. We're go for operation whenever you give the word." Lasky took a breath, feeling the weight of command. He was about to commit the UNSC's most advanced warship to a battle in another galaxy's civil war, attacking an enemy installation for reasons that weren't directly related to getting his people home. But the Empire had attacked first, had proven they would never allow the Infinity to exist peacefully in their space, and the Death Star plans could be the key to preventing another Alderaan, another world destroyed because fascists possessed weapons of mass destruction. Sometimes you didn't get to choose your wars. Sometimes they chose you. "All ships," he said into the command channel, his voice carrying to every vessel in the assault fleet. "This is Captain Lasky. Today we strike a blow for freedom against tyranny. We're fighting alongside allies from this galaxy to protect innocent lives from a weapon of genocide. The Empire thinks we're at Fondor walking into their trap. Let's show them the cost of underestimating us. All ships, jump to hyperspace. Target, Scarif. May the Force be with us all." The last part felt strange to say, invoking a mystical energy field he didn't fully understand. But the rebel crews cheered, their spirits lifted by the acknowledgement of their beliefs. The Infinity's slipspace drive spun up, tearing a hole in reality. Around it, the rebel fleet activated their hyperdrives, vanishing in flashes of pseudo-motion. And light years away, at Fondor, Darth Vader stood on the bridge of the Executor waiting for an enemy that would never arrive. He felt it the moment the realization struck. A disturbance in the Force, a shift in probabilities that suggested the unknown vessel had made a different choice. "Lord Vader," Admiral Piet ventured carefully, "the rebel fleet hasn't appeared. Perhaps they saw through the trap." Vader extended his senses through the Force, seeking the disturbance's source. There, Scarif, the data vault, the Death Star plans. "They went to Scarif," he said, his mechanical voice carrying certainty. "Contact Admiral Tarkin. Tell him the research facility is under attack. We move to intercept immediately." "My lord, the hyperspace jump will take 43 minutes. I am aware." Vader turned from the viewport, cape sweeping behind him. "Prepare my shuttle. When we arrive, I will personally ensure these outsiders understand the price of defying the Empire." The Executor turned, its massive engines flaring, beginning the journey to Scarif. They would arrive too late to stop the initial assault, but they would be in time for the escape, and Vader would be ready. The Force had shown him a vision, the Spartans who had injured him, standing against him once more. But this time there would be no retreat. This time he would break them, capture their ship's commander, and present the Emperor with the greatest prize imaginable. A warship and crew from another galaxy. The foundation for an empire that would span beyond a single reality. "Soon," Vader promised the darkness. "Soon you will learn that none can stand against the power of the dark side." Scarif's tropical paradise appearance was deceptive. Beneath the palm trees and pristine beaches lay one of the Empire's most secure research facilities. A vault containing every secret project, every weapons development, every classified military operation. And somewhere in that vault were the Death Star plans. The rebel fleet dropped out of hyperspace with guns blazing. Mon Calamari cruisers engaged the Star Destroyers immediately, turbo lasers lighting up space in brilliant green. The orbital command station, a massive ring surrounding the shield gate, opened fire with devastating accuracy. And then the Infinity arrived. The Imperial forces had never seen anything like the jump from slipspace, the violent tear in reality, the way space itself seemed to scream in protest. The massive UNSC warship materialized, already moving, already firing, its MAC guns tracking targets with computer-guided precision. The first Star Destroyer died in seconds, a MAC round punching through its shields and hull, internal explosions tearing it apart from within. The second tried to maneuver, to bring its weapons to bear, but the Infinity was too fast, too maneuverable for something its size. Archer missiles streaked across space, overwhelming the Imperial ship's point defenses, detonating against armor and superstructure. The Star Destroyer shuddered, tried to retreat, and took a second MAC round that shattered its back. It broke in half, both sections tumbling away, escape pods launching desperately. "Orbital shield still active," Roland reported. "I'm detecting the generator on the planet's surface. Ground forces need to disable it." "Palmer," Lasky ordered. "You're up. Get down there and shut down that shield." "On it." The Pelican dropships launched, screaming through atmosphere, their armored hulls absorbing fire from anti-aircraft emplacements. TIE fighters pursued, but longsword escorts ripped through them, clearing the path for the ground assault. The Pelicans touched down on a beach 3 kilometers from the research facility's main tower. Ramps dropped, and hell came to Scarif. Spartan Fire Team Osiris hit the ground running, their armor shrugging off blaster fire, their weapons barking precision death. Behind them came rebel commandos, Luke Skywalker with his lightsaber ignited and blazing blue, and Princess Leia with a blaster in each hand. The battle for the Death Star plans had begun, and somewhere in hyperspace, Darth Vader was coming. Coming for the soldiers who had dared to wound him, coming to finish what had been started. The final confrontation was inevitable. Technology versus destiny, firepower versus the Force, and only one would prevail. The UNSC Infinity had entered the Star Wars galaxy by accident, but it would remain by necessity. The Battle of Scarif raged for 6 hours. Rebel forces and UNSC Marines fighting side by side against stormtroopers and Imperial defenses, while overhead the Infinity held off reinforcements that arrived too late to prevent the worst outcome for the Empire. Fire Team Osiris, alongside Luke Skywalker and Princess Leia, fought their way into the research vault. The data was retrieved. Complete Death Star schematics, weakness identified, transmitted to the Rebel fleet before the facility could be destroyed. But the cost was high. Rebel casualties numbered in the hundreds. The Infinity took damage that would require weeks to repair. And when Vader finally arrived aboard the Executor, his fury was palpable even across the void of space. The confrontation between Vader and Locke's Spartans on the landing platform became legendary in both Rebel and Imperial circles. Armored warriors from another galaxy holding off a Sith Lord long enough for their forces to evacuate. Vader killed 3 Rebel commandos and wounded Spartan bucks severely, but the Spartans' coordination and superior firepower forced him to choose between pursuing them and preventing the Death Star plans from escaping. He chose the former. The plans escaped regardless. Captain Lasky made a decision as the Infinity limped away from Scarif. The UNSC would not abandon the Rebel alliance. Not because of shared ideology. The politics of this galaxy were still foreign and complex, but because the Empire had proven itself hostile beyond negotiation. Because the Death Star represented the kind of genocide that humanity had fought the Covenant to prevent. Because soldiers recognized tyranny when they saw it, regardless of what galaxy it occupied. The alliance formalized slowly over the following weeks. The rebels gained access to UNSC tactical doctrine, limited technological exchange, and the knowledge that the galaxy's most powerful independent warship would not stand aside while the Empire tightened its grip. The UNSC gained star charts, intelligence on Imperial deployments, guidance on navigating galactic politics, and allies who understood fighting against overwhelming odds. And most importantly, both sides gained hope. For the rebellion, the Infinity's presence proved the Empire was not invincible, that superior firepower and tactics could challenge even Force users. For the UNSC, the rebels represented a connection to this galaxy's peoples, a chance to find resources and knowledge that might eventually lead them home. But the war was far from over. The second Death Star continued construction. Vader nursed his wounds and studied captured UNSC weapon fragments, seeking weaknesses to exploit. The Emperor himself took interest in these beings from beyond the known galaxy, seeing in them either a threat to be eliminated or a resource to be claimed. Luke Skywalker meditated on the strange void the UNSC represented in the Force, wondering what it meant for destiny itself when variables existed that couldn't be predicted. Princess Leia found herself genuinely respecting Captain Lasky's pragmatic approach to leadership, recognizing in him a kindred spirit who'd learned command through survival rather than theory. And deep in the Infinity's research labs, scientists studied captured lightsabers and recordings of Force abilities, trying to understand how this mystical energy interacted with physical reality. Some reported feeling something, a subtle awareness they'd never noticed before, as if exposure to Force users had awakened sensitivities that had always existed but remained dormant in humanity's isolated development. The implications were staggering and would take years to fully explore. For now, the UNSC Infinity remained in the Star Wars galaxy, a warship without a home, a crew without a nation, but no longer alone. They had found purpose in the fight against tyranny, had found allies in the most unexpected places, and had proven that technology born from one galaxy's desperate war could stand against the mystical powers of another. The collision of two realities had created something unprecedented, a partnership between those who believed in the Force and those who'd never known it existed, between rebels fighting with hope and soldiers fighting with steel, between destiny and determination. Neither side knew what the future held, whether the UNSC would find a way home, whether the rebellion would defeat the Empire, whether Vader's obsession with capturing the Infinity would lead to disaster or triumph. But they knew this. They would face it together. Technology and destiny intertwined. firepower and the Force combined. And somewhere in hyperspace, making the jump toward their next objective, Captain Thomas Lasky stood on the Infinity's bridge and thought about the galaxy they'd stumbled into, the allies they'd found, and the war they'd been forced to join. "Roland," he said quietly, "what are the odds we survive this?" The AI materialized, considered the question with his usual thoroughness, then smiled. "Never tell me the odds, Captain. I learned that from Princess Leia. Apparently it's something smugglers say in this galaxy." Lasky allowed himself a smile. "Fair enough. Set course for the fleet rendezvous. Let's see what the rebellion needs us to do next." "Aye, Captain. Though I should mention, sensors are detecting something odd in slip space. Fluctuations that match the anomaly that brought us here. It's faint, but it's there. A way home. Maybe, or maybe just proof that the universe isn't done surprising us yet." The Infinity jumped, vanishing into the dimensional fold between realities, carrying with it a crew that had traveled further than any human in history and found war waiting even in the most distant galaxy. The UNSC had entered the Star Wars universe, and nothing would ever be the same for either galaxy.